A whole new season begins right here. Welcome to Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS. It's the first round of the Endurance Cup. It is free practice about to get underway. It is a 43-strong entry, and we are back at Monza after a year away with last year's shuffled calendar and the late start to the season. But although the fans aren't allowed to join us at the circuit, you're more than welcome around the globe to watch some great pictures of a fabulous entry at what you might argue is the spiritual home of the Endurance Cup, because it was at Monza back in 2011 that it all began as the then Blockpan Endurance Series, and boy, hasn't it evolved ever since. It is a cold morning, it is a bright morning, the sun is shining, and the drivers are eager to get out on track. One or two were doing the bronze test yesterday. This will be our first opportunity to see 43 cars on the circuit. And John Watson joins David Addison. John, what a track this is.
Well, good morning, David, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Monza. And talking about spirituality, some people call this the Temple of Speed, but to me, it's the Cathedral of Speed. The magnificent Monza circuit, 5.7 kilometers in length, 10 turns, but in fact, some people count 11. But what a racetrack that's had various configurations, including the infamous banked Monza circuit, which one might say, if you're old school, sadly is no longer in use.
Well, it is a great circuit, and we know from years past that you've got to have a good aero-friendly car, but you've got some very fast sections of this. A slippery shape. We've seen Ferrari, we've seen Lamborghini excel here in the past. It's all about brute horsepower, and there is that banking that is still part of the furniture at Monza, and it just reminds you, John, how brave drivers were in the 1950s to cope with that.
David, what it reminds me of and makes me think about currently, track limits is always a major feature at every event. There are no track limits on that banking. There is the racetrack, and that's it.
Now, we've got new liveries, we've got new teams, we've got new driver combinations, but this is going to be a very, very strong contender for HRT, the Hap Racing team, Maro Engel, Luca Stolz and Vincent Abril in the Mercedes. That is a car that's going to draw attention to itself, John, in lots of ways, not just the colour scheme, but the drivers as well. That could be a real gun car for a win.
Very much so. I mean, look at the driver lineup. You mentioned Maro Engel, Luca Stolz, now Vincent Abril coming over from what do we call the team? You've got Falcon. Me.
Yes, Acura ASP. We've had some of the top teams.
Yeah, Acura ASP, exactly.
Get the rust off our GT brains. What about WRT? You've just seen 32. Dries van Thor with Charles Witz and Calvin van der Linde. Now that's going to be strong. 31 you're looking at. Raicho Tomita, Frank Bird and Valdemar Eriksson. So that's the young guns car, if you like, that runs in the Silver Cup. WRT busy in Barcelona as well as being here this weekend. And Florian Scholzer, Oliver Grutz and Nico Bastian there with a Pro-Am Get Speed entered Mercedes. So it is, as you can see, a very busy pit lane, and the drivers set for 90 minutes of free practice. We are about a minute away from the session starting. There is the Rothko WRT entry, Benji Goethe, Stuart Hall and James Pull in the Gulf colours, and that's going to be an intriguing one to watch, I think, because Benji Goethe gets better all the time. Stuart Hall is the steadying hand, and James Pull did a good job last year for Barwell. Now, what about Porsche, John? We've had dynamic winners here in the past. That was in the wet, in the dry this weekend. Romain Dumas, Mikael Pedersen, Andrea Rizzoli. Another good combination of drivers.
I think that Porsche had great success here previously. I see no reason whatsoever to not think that they could continue, whether it's the Dynamic Motorsport Team 2 entries or the GPX entry. Car number 22, Matt Campbell, Earl Bamber, Mathieu Jaminet. Great lineups all the way from the front to the tail of the pits. There is the 54 Porsche, Christian Engelhardt, Bachler, and of course Matteo Taroli. So personally, I anticipate seeing strong showing from all the Porsches, but listen, wherever you look, that number 4 HRT Mercedes, the ACA ASP Mercedes, wherever you look, the Audis, nobody has a clue right now what the outcome will be at the end of this session, let alone at the end of 3 hours on Sunday evening.
No, you're absolutely right. You take a pin and you take the entry list and you put one in the other, and that's about as scientific as it can be just now. But look at that as the cars make their way down the pit lane. eager in some cases for a bit of clear track space. We know that the chicanes can always produce drama around here. We've got, don't forget, the overall, Pro-Am and Silver Cups to look for. Garage 59 comes back to try and retain the Pro-Am title. Alexander West, Chris Goodwin and Johnny Adam drive the, there it is, 188 Aston, and Chris Goodwin goes out first in that car.
Another team I'm going to be following with great interest is a newcomer to our series. That's the Jota team. It's the single McLaren entry, a McLaren 720S GT3 with Oliver Wilkinson, Ben Barnicoat and Rob Bell. Just keep an eye on that number 38 McLaren. I think that's a car that could be the sleeper of the weekend.
I'd go along with that, yes. I think it's a good shout, and McLaren has gone well in previous iteration of the car. If you go back a few years when Rob Bell, along with Colin Edegard, Shane van Gisbergen, took the overall crown. So yes, don't rule out McLaren. We've got 9 different brands represented across the 43 cars that are on track. 1 or 2 have already been in strife because the Kessel Racing Ferrari that we'll come to in due course, that had an accident in the test earlier on in the week, and a new chassis has had to be brought, and so too for number 5 Mercedes, the Haupt Sanchez Assenheimer car. That also was damaged in the test. Now you can change the car if it's from the paid tests, because that's effectively before the meeting starts. That is before the permit kicks in, so the stewards enable you to change the car if it's beyond repair, or change the engine, for example, without fear of a penalty, because it's not part of the official event. And there the Aston Martin booms past the pits. Of course, times we will come to. At the moment, they're all rather academic, and we haven't got everybody out on track. Now, John, that's another potential winner. There are so many, but the band is back together. Mirko Bortolotti, Marco Mappelli and Andrea Caldarelli, and they didn't have a great season last year. They have come back all guns blazing.
Well, this season, not in Europe and North America, Andrea Caldarelli carried forward all the success he's enjoyed with his Orange One FFF racing team, the Lamborghini team. So maybe he has found that mojo that he didn't lose it. I think just the competition caught up and swamped the Lamborghini team. But let's watch and see yet again. But it's an open book. No one has a clue as we look at Christian Engelhardt up into the Ascari chicane, and he's just either looking for track position. I suspect he does not want to have traffic around him. There he goes. He's accelerating hard now as he's got the Audi following him. That'll frustrate the Audi.
Yes, you could see him pull the trigger, couldn't you, coming out of the Variante Ascari, as there Raffaele Marciello goes over the timing line, and this could well be our first, if you like, proper decent lap of the session, because really now we're into the first flying laps. John, talk us around Monza with one of the stars of Mercedes.
Well, exiting out of the first chicane, then down into what was the Curva Grande. It's not any longer called the Curva Grande, but it is a long, long, flat-out right-hand corner. Easy flat in these GT3 cars. Then the run down. Marcello already fastest overall in Sector 1 into the second chicane. This is the chicane where overtaking is possible, but overdriving is a guarantee. Then into the first of the 2 Lesmos, Lesmo 1. Reprofiled a number of years ago, still a great corner, but watch on the exit for track limits. Lesmo 2, very much a shadow of its former self. That was a wonderful, absolutely you-know-what to the wall corner. Then the drop down the hill under the bank circuit. The bridge that you see there, that comprises part of the bank circuit, and then up hard on the brakes into the Ascari chicane. A really, really good chicane. Hard to find a way around anybody into it or in the middle of it. On the exit, be careful of the curb on the exit. That will catch people out. Already caught out the Kessel Ferrari. Then the run down into the final corner. Parabolica. What a corner. What a name for a corner. Again, another overtaking opportunity. But you've got to be fair and square alongside the car you're trying to pass. Be careful on the exit. Do not overrun. There is the demarcation markings on the racetrack. If you run over that, you will have your time deleted, and then across start-finish line. Start-finish line are 2 different parts. Start of the race is just almost at pit lane exit. Start-finish is really where the pit lane entry is. So
that put Raffaele Marciello quickest, 1:47. 886. That's the Sky Tempesta Ferrari, which was so impressive last year. And Chris Froggatt, Eddie Cheever are joined for this weekend by Stefan Gehrig. So a slight shuffle to the driver lineup. And Eddie Cheever, the third, I think we're up to, is the man behind the wheel of that car at the moment. It's out of the AF Corsa stable. And Eddie Cheever is another driver, I think, that gets better and better the more miles that he does. But he looked really competitive last year, John. We're riding with him now.
Well, he's already competitive last year. He's now got fastest sector time, sector 1. So that is a considerable amount by 0.2 of a second. But he will lose time now in traffic coming through Lesmo 2. And then the run down behind, running behind the Audi, down the dip, under the bridge, up the hill, not close enough to think of an overtake unless there's cooperation, which there isn't. So he's a personal best, but will have lost a fraction of time. Now with the Mercedes and the Audi, Mercedes pulls over to the side, and that's good driving. As we look at the 88 Mercedes coming down just ahead of this group of 3 cars.
We've got at the moment BMW topping the times, incidentally. Sheldon van der Linde goes top, his brother Kelvin driving for Audi. So BMW ahead of Bentley actually at the moment. We've got the sole CMR Bentley, Nelson Panciatici at the wheel. Here comes Eddie Cheever out of the Parabolica, up towards the timing line. 8th quickest the car currently is, goes 5th fastest, an improvement then. So good effort that by Eddie Cheever. Part of that possibly with the toe coming past the pit. Right on the tail of the Audi here, John.
You see why he had to back out of it. There was a car that was exiting from pit lane. 3 cars into one would have been very tight. So good judgment by Eddie Cheever, the third, to back out. I mean, you're only, what, 12 or so minutes, 15 minutes into the session? What? No, not even that, 8 minutes into the session. Why would you take a risk like that? So good judgment, but of course it's another lap. He's got to work hard to find a way around the Audi down into the second chicane. Nothing possible he can do.
Number 16, we are told, is under investigation for possibly speeding in the pit lane. That's Tim Zimmerman, who is currently at the wheel of the Grasser Racing Team Lamborghini. This is what John was referring to a moment ago. So riding on board with Eddie Cheever, he comes past the pits, but look to the right as he thinks about making it through the traffic. There's the car leaving the pit lane, and there's nowhere for Eddie Cheever to go, so he's got to slot back in. It's an issue in free practice, but that's going to be much more of an issue in the race, of course, John, when you've got lots of pit stops cycling through during the 3 hours.
I mean, it was possible. I mean, Eddie Cheever could have squeezed through. You might consider doing it in the race, but it's 9 minutes now into the session. It was the right judgment to say, no, I don't know whether that car's aware that I might be making an overtake, so I'll just back out of it. That shows to me a strong degree of thinking, intelligence, maturity from Eddie Cheever.
Now that is Timo Glock, former Grand Prix driver, former DTM racer, somebody new to the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe powered by AWS Endurance Cup. It's going to be interesting to see how Timo Glock gets on, but he's really looking forward, I think, to this new opportunity with Martin Tomczyk. The 2 BMW drivers have been mates for ages and have always said we'd like to race together, share a car. Well, finally it has happened, and Timo returning to Monza where he raced in Formula 1, currently 14th fastest. But again, it just shows you, doesn't it, how impressive the entry list is for season 2021.
I mean, Timo Glock is almost, one might call, a veteran, having spent many years in Formula 1. He is also a renowned commentator for German television. But back here racing at Monza, what I'm interested in also is we've got a young driver who's they might call him a spare driver, Jack Aitken, racing here this weekend in the Emil Frey Lamborghini. That's the future of maybe what we might describe as the pinnacle of motorsport, but using this series as a foothold to just get racing and show what talent he's got.
And another one you could put into that category, I agree, John, is Callum Islet, who was the runner-up in Formula 2 last year. As part of the Ferrari Driver Academy, he has been moved across to GT racing. And Callum Islet, Antonio Fuoco and Davide Rigon for Ferrari around Monza. I mean, that could be another very impressive combination. That is the Ferrari in question. It is the fastest in the session currently. Antonio Fuoco, another ex-single-seater gun, is the man behind the wheel. That's gone quickest on a 1:46.674, the Iron Lynx Ferrari. Antonio Fuoco, as I say, is the man driving at the moment. But that, again, is a really impressive lineup of drivers, isn't it?
Yes, it is. When Calamada sort of got shuffled out of the options that he would have hoped to have had for 2021, but great to have him here at Monza, Ferrari Academy driver.
So there is Antonio Fuoco, and he's half a second up on Raffaele Marciello, who's been back into the pit lane. Nelson Petrucci's Bentley is third, fourth Sheldon van der Linde's BMW. Ben Barnicoat in the McLaren, that what he was saying might be a sleeper, well, fifth fastest so far. I know it's only free practice, and I know we've only had the first 10, 11 minutes, but even so, Ben Barnicoat doing a good job. He's up to fifth quickest, and sixth is Mikkel Pedersen in the Porsche, as Antonio Fuoco now starts to get wound up, doesn't he? You can see the car picking up a little bit more pace. And whoops, a big lose in the background there. And is the Lamborghini going to hit anything solid?
I think it hit it backwards.
Yeah.
So that just, again, reminding you, the exit curb from the Ascari chicane, temperatures are relatively low. There might have been a moisture on it. Has he managed to, I think he might have gotten away with that. I thought he had bumped it or reversed it into the barrier, but Tim Zimmerman may just have gotten away with it. The rear wing looks to be in its correct position. Certainly there'll be four very flat spotted tires on that Lamborghini, and you can see what he did. He was exiting from the chicane too early, and consequently car went across and there he goes. You know what? I think he has gotten away with it.
I think you're right, and I think that's the save of the day. I mean, that could have been very expensive. He was probably only a few inches away from damaging the rear of the car, but yes, he has got away with it. Tim Zimmerman, ex-Formula 4 TCR racer, new to GT racing at this level, and as he comes back towards the pit lane, letting all the traffic go. Here's what happened, John.
Yes, just watch the orange Lamborghini. As you can see, the car already sliding, I mean, essentially beyond the grip threshold the car had, and then over the curb, and once you've done that, the grip level on the tarmac, essentially as it is, between the curbing and the barrier, just about got the car stopped before there was rear contact. And he drives back to the pits, I think probably thinking, what a lucky boy have I been, as Matt Campbell comes through the chicane and makes his way down into Curva Grande as the different colour scheme for this number 22 Porsche GPX Racing. Not accustomed to seeing it in this particular, unless my screen, that looks white to me rather than the traditional blue.
Well, last year it was the retro Gulf liveries, now it's the Martini livery, isn't it? It's a nod to Porsche's heritage. Looks good, that.
It's always a great colour scheme, the Martini, those red, turquoise and blue. Wow, the back end stepped out there on the exit of Lesmo 1. Matt Campbell got it back in control.
So Matt Campbell is currently 12, and this, again, we know is going to be a very competitive lineup of drivers. Matt Campbell, Earl Bamber, Mathieu Jaminet for GPX Racing, and last year's nod to the heritage of Porsche came through those Gulf Targa Florio colour schemes, now in the Martini colours, and it does indeed look good as Matt Campbell accelerates down towards the Parabolica. So this free practice session, an opportunity, of course, for everybody to get some mileage behind the wheel, to explore the circuit, to explore the car. We've had another spin, I understand, from the Porsche of Allied Racing. GT4 graduates Jan Kasperlik, Nicolas Schurl and Julien Apolitos have had a moment, but that car has survived it. The driver was Nicolas Schurl, a real young gun of that car, as Matt Campbell heads back into the pit lane, possibly a legacy of that slide. It was odd because at the pace it was going, the car didn't seem to almost snap away. Sheldon van der Linde was the quickest for a time. He's fifth, and the Valkenhorst BMW into the pit lane. Valkenhorst, the team, remember, that won for BMW the Intercontinental GT Challenge in that Kyle Army 9 hours last year.
Just going back to Matt Campbell, we saw the pretty aggressive slide through Lesmo 1. As he was coming through the exit of Parabolica, again the back end of his Porsche just very quickly snapped, and I don't know whether he then decided this is the point for me to come in. I can understand a car doing it once on a lap, but seeing it twice in a lap, I think they want to go back and have a look at the car setup, especially in these slightly cooler conditions than we're going to see later in the afternoon, or certainly we'll see tomorrow afternoon when this race will get underway at 3 p.m.
You remember that Tim Zimmermann had that spin in the Lamborghini. I think I'd mentioned already that he was being looked at for speeding in the pit lane. Well, he's now being looked at for speeding in the pit lane for a second time, and we've only had 15 minutes of the session, so it's quite a torrid morning for him, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think a team manager would look at that and say, at least he's consistent.
Or look at it and say, calm down, dear, because clearly Tim Zimmermann is getting a bit giddy, but enthusiasm is one thing.
David, one might say, in fairness to Tim Zimmermann, it may be an issue on the car, because speed limit buttons usually are electronically controlled, and if there is an issue, he might be doing everything correctly, but the system is failing, and therefore he is the one that's getting the ire from you and me, wherein the guy maybe, look, I've done everything correctly. Good old hand, Marcus Winkelhock, still a winner in whatever car you put him in.
Yeah, and metronomic with his lap times, consistent. Another great ambassador for Audi, part of the fabric for decades, it feels like now. Interestingly, we've still only had 31 times offered up out of this 43 strong entry, so some of the teams biding their times, maybe letting the circuit warm up a little bit, let other people go off and rubber in the circuit for them. There's the dynamic Porsche Christian Engelhardt in. And that car, as you see, is in its garage, which therefore means serious work is going on.
I don't know why at this stage they want to put the car back in the garage, other than they're making significant changes under the car. Primarily they're working around the front and rear suspension. So maybe what we had seen with Matt Campbell's Porsche, where the car looked to be a little bit more lively than would be appropriate, might be the same situation with Engelhardt in the dynamic motorsport. Maybe the setup that they've opted to go with isn't quite the system or setup that is appropriate to the temperature particularly, and maybe track conditions as well.
Could well be, yes, could well be. As we see there, 57 getting ready to go. That's the Winward Racing Mercedes. Russell Ward, the American, the Anglo-Swiss driver Philip Ellis, and Canadian Michael Grenier. Number 90, the Mad Panda Mercedes, Ezequiel Perez Compact and Rick Brokers, just the two of them to drive that car. And Ezequiel was last year's Pro-Am champion, wasn't he, on the combined championship sprint and endurance.
I mean, it's still as barking mad as it was last year, but I love the whole concept of Mad Panda, the name of the team, the graphics on the car, and Ezequiel himself is a personality and a character, and fits and blends absolutely perfectly into the whole concept Mad Panda.
So there, over the timing line, goes the Mercedes, and number 90 is Rick Brokers behind the wheel of it. So let's follow the young Dutch driver around Monza. He's got a bit of traffic up the road though, John, hasn't he?
Yes, I mean, it's inevitable. You've got 43 cars entered. Not everybody, as you mentioned, has gone on track. And it's always the case that you'll catch a car when you're on a lap. You can see Brooker's already on the headlights. Get out of my way, I'm on a flying lap. There is an etiquette, we talk about it year in, year out, race in, race out. If you're in a different category to a faster car, well, give that car the opportunity to get through cleanly. You will not lose any significant amount of time, but it builds a sense of what I would describe as goodwill between the different categories that are competing here over this weekend, and it also gets away from that kind of maybe red mist that sometimes can descend on a driver who is being frustrated by a car in another category which is as quick in a straight line as your car is, and you can't find a way around it.
So now the road is getting quite busy ahead of Rick Brokers as the Ferraris battle their way down towards the Parabolica. But Rick doing well in the sectors. Green is good. It means he has gone faster than previously. Purples are the ideal, but we've not quite got that stage for him yet. The theoretical best lap time of the session is a 1:46.674, and that's a Callum Islet Ferrari time. Callum is now behind the wheel of it, which did purple sectors all the way across. Rick Brokers does 3 greens, which is good. and goes up to 7th fastest. So just as he catches the traffic, Kessel Ferrari is the next one he's going to try and get past. Benjamin Heites doesn't make life easy to get by. Back into the session is 56 Porsche. That's the Mikael Pedersen, Andrea Rizzoli, Romain Dumas Porsche. Now things are getting a bit more, not frenetic, but certainly the tempo is increasing in the pit lane as more and more cars are joining the session, more and more pit stops are cycling through. Now what about this, John, as another possible winning car for Emil Frey Racing? Albert Costa behind the wheel, and we saw he was very quick, although the occasional touch of red missed last year. If he can calm himself down, Costa should be another gun at the front. Very much so, and a real threat and challenge to the Orange Racing FFF1 Lamborghini team. And we saw last year Albert Costa, I mean, show him any clear air whatsoever. If he's got elbows out, well, he's just a great racing driver. Very emotional, very passionate, very quick. And it's interesting the way that the Emil Frey Racing team has got on with the job with these Lamborghinis. If you think back, it was the team that, and there's gravel on the road there, look, coming out of the second chicane, it was the team that had that win in Paul Ricard in amazing fashion, a lap from home with the Lexus, and then almost instantly, having ticked that box, out wide goes Costa, the Lesmos, the team then switched attention to the Lamborghinis, but running initially really in the International GT Open Championship, perhaps away from the glare of activity, learning about the car, developing good results, and then coming back into the Endurance Cup last season and underlining how good the team now is. The relationship with Lamborghini is a very strong one indeed. So we talk about years past, it was Grasser Racing Team. That was then caught and perhaps overtaken by the FFF Racing Team. But now there's this other major threat for top Lamborghini squad, and it is Emil Frey Racing. Yes, I mean, to some degree, all the hard yards, I think, were done by the Orange One FFF Racing Team in 2019. They went down a different development path to, let's say, Grasser Racing had done. And I think that's now being transferred into all the customer Lamborghini teams that are racing, not just here this weekend, but around the world. They've managed to find a direction which means that not one driver in a team can manage it, but all three drivers across the range of team owners can work this car. And Emil Frey has done a very strong job in 2020 and looks like they will continue doing so. Certainly with that lineup of Altoe, Seidler and Albert Costa. I mean, there's what, we've got 17 pro teams here this weekend. That's part of the frustration, just as the 4 Mercedes comes down into the first chicane. Tried to use a little bit of the Lamborghini's exit to pick up some slipstream, but really have a little note. But Maro Engel, quality wherever you look. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the joys of this, and in a sense, some drivers almost get forgotten about, ignored, because the entry is so vast, and each car has got at least 2, in most cases 3 drivers. It's almost impossible to pick out everybody over the course of the weekend. But Maro Engel is somebody that always draws attention to himself, that very Australian-sounding German after his spell in V8 Supercars for Mercedes Down Under, and winner of the GT Cup in Macau. Great race driver for Mercedes, whether it has been in GT Sprint or the Endurance Cup round. And although the car is only 19th, we are of course in free practice. We're almost at the end of the first third of this 90-minute session. But the Haupt Racing team, with Sean Breslin, formerly of Black Falcon, overseeing all of this, working through a programme. There's the Iron Lynx Ferrari that's topping the times. Callum Eilert now behind the wheel. The other fascination, John, is that we keep obviously referring to regular GT stars, but there's that next wave coming through. You mentioned Jack Aitken, there's Callum Eilert as well. You know, it's interesting, isn't it, to see how these new drivers get on in some cases a new discipline for them against what you might call the old hands. Well, those that are discovering this new discipline are realizing that, to me, there is a world available to them, and a long career available to them outside of this Valhalla of being a Formula One driver. I understand why people want to do it, but the realities today are it's not impossible, but it's not much different, but not much short of that. But come and join us here at Monza, and for the remaining part of this season, the Fanatec GT World Challenge powered by AWS Euro Endurance Cup. You've got outstanding competition, and I mean, I cannot pick a single winner per event, and even after qualifying, it's very difficult. Of course, one of the other factors that, to take them as examples, Jack Aitken, Callum Islet are going to have, is that not only are you going from single-seaters to a GT car, different feel, different aero, but you're sharing a car, and that's something very different for them, isn't it? Either to have to give their car to somebody else or take it over from another driver and adapt to it straight out of the pit lane.
Well, the whole concept of sharing is sort of an anathema to a racing driver, because by nature, racing drivers, they have to be selfish. But when you join into a GT championship like this, you've got two other drivers, and part of that sharing process is that you make a car that each of the three drivers can work with. I had on one occasion a teammate who changed my car overnight, or our car overnight, didn't tell me. When I got in and drove the car, it was impossible for me to drive. And in one particular race, I came into the pits after 3 laps, stepped out of the car and said, this car is undrivable. Stepped out of it, walked away. I mean, just that attitude, so that kind of not working together as a team, for me, is unforgivable. And I don't think any one driver in the pit lane would ever consider doing that. It was an unusual circumstance, and it never ever happened again.
There's a certain amount of compromise, I guess, isn't there, to accommodate the desires of the three drivers. Now, what do we read into this? That's a rather abandoned Lamborghini. Almost like it's a spare.
I would say maybe they haven't got the set of tyres they want to run. We're maybe not quite ready to, maybe they weren't minded, or they're deciding what they want to do. I mean, we've just got over an hour remaining. The set of tyres they would have had on, I assume, would be probably fresh, if not new. There is a glimpse of the Toyota McLaren. So it's unusual to see a car in the pit lane up on the axle stand. Ordinarily, that would be back in the garage, up on the axle stands.
Yeah, it was also the lack of people around it that was slightly puzzling. Anyway, there, number 38, the McLaren. That's Ben Barnicoat still at the wheel of it. Ben, one of the 24 drivers that's going to be doing the first of the esports series races this evening. Very handy esports racer, and having to get past the dynamic Porsche there as he heads up through the Curva Grande, so life is getting busy for him. Albert Costa, by the way, for Emil Frey Racing, has just gone third fastest. We've got 40 cars now of the 43 that have hit the track. Still slightly puzzled as to why he would give up half an hour of the session, though, John.
I have to say on that one, pass.
Yeah.
Again, look at the McLaren again, very similar to what we saw from Matt Campbell and the Porsche coming through Lesmo 1. Two entirely different configurations, both delivering a very similar reaction on the exit. So maybe there's something on the circuit, rather than maybe we're looking at the individual cars and saying maybe they might make a change to the car setup. So right now Ben Barnicoat having to deal with a sliding rear on his McLaren, not dissimilar to the sliding rear on Matt Campbell's Porsche.
Yeah, very true. So Ferrari topping the times from Bentley, Lamborghini, Mercedes. Philip Ellis has gone fourth quickest. Much underrated driver, because he's perhaps not really been latched onto by the UK motorsport press. He's done the bulk of his racing in Germany, or in mainland Europe as Philip. But quick driver, he's fourth, ahead of Daniel Juncadella, fifth. Romain Dumas is sixth, Porsche. Sheldon van der Linde's BMW seventh. Ben Barnicoat, you're about to see break the timing beam, and as he goes through, he stays eighth, ahead of Rick Brooker's Mercedes and James Poole in the Audi, rounding out the top 10. And as I say, 40 of the 43 cars have ventured out. Big flash of the lights as Daniel Juncadella is on the tail of Ben Barnicoat. They are, in Ben's case, 8th, in Danny's case, 5th in the times, but the Mercedes now looking for a way to get through. In the pit lane, WRT getting ready with number 32 Audi to send that back into the session. And of course, as ever, John, with WRT, and especially this car, Vanthoor, Weerts, van der Linde, ignore it at your peril.
I mean, any car that Dries Vanthoor is in is always a potential winning car, backed up by Kelvin van der Linde, who to me is one of the most exciting and certainly entertaining, and also a good overtaker. And we keep referring to the young Charles Weerts. Well, you can only be young 2 seasons ago. He's now probably an old man at maybe 20 or 21.
Yes, he seems to have been part of the fabric for a long time, but you're right, it's only a couple of seasons that he's really been in the championship. As into the pit lane comes Romain Dumas. is just an amazing entry. I know we say this at the start of every season, but it really is absolutely stellar. And what is also very encouraging, John, given what the world has gone through for the last year, is still going through, is the size of the entry. You know, we're not looking at a dozen cars, we've got over 40. That is, with what is happening in the world, just amazing.
I mean, it's, what can you say? The world has been in a state. Thank goodness, here at Monza, the beginning of our season, and I mean, 43 cars, the best, I think, GT field ever, and certainly the best in the world right now. And I just cannot wait to see what's going to happen tomorrow afternoon. What happens in qualifying will give us an indication. It will not necessarily be what we would see as being the final result, because so much happens here at Monza on the opening lap into the first chicane. We keep saying it year in, year out, and there's always a compression as the cars leave there. That's the grid, and the run down to the first chicane, probably about 500 meters. That large field, concertinas coming down and into the braking zone. Please, let's not spoil a race by somebody trying to win it in the first chicane.
Nico Bastien you're looking at, 28 fastest at the moment, number 2 Mercedes, that he shares with Florian Scholz and Olivier Grutz. That's a Pro-Am entry. Nico will be the star in that car, I think it is fair to say, and pressing on at the moment. One other thing to just mention in advance of the race itself is that the Delta pit stop times that we've had variants of in recent years have gone for this season, and what we now have is a time for the refueling connection. Now that is here 40 seconds, so there's a minimum refueling time of 40 seconds. You can do tyres and fuel at the same time now. You can, rather than a 2-part pit stop, you can get everything done at once. But after that 40 second, then you start to see who can win or lose in the pit lane, because if you are very good on your pit stop, it should all be done and dusted at the end of 40. If you're not quite so good, then you start to lose time. So it stops the arms race of spending, which SRO has always been concerned about, but it does bring back a little bit more of the strategy, and it does show who the good quick teams are going to be on those pit stops. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the race come tomorrow afternoon.
Well, certainly they are trying to put a stop to what you call the arms race, where some teams were getting into extremely expensive wheel guns, for example, amongst other bits of equipment, to try and create a level financial playing field. But inevitably, it will be the higher-end teams that have got the facilities to just practice, makes perfect, to ensure that those pit stops work and there are no unexpected wheel nut drops or gun drops or whatever can affect a critical pit stop.
Absolutely so, and it brings back that competition within the pit lane rather than having a situation that we had a few years ago where the work is done and the teams are almost twiddling their thumbs before the stopwatch allows the car to be released. 159 is the other Garage 59 Aston Martin. Nicolas Kiergaard at the wheel of it, who's come from single-seater racing into GT cars. He was part of that Team Parker Racing Bentley Academy last year, but go back a couple of seasons, front runner in the BRDC British Formula 3 Championship, and occasional historic racer. He and his dad share a Daytona Cobra in Masters historic events, but Nicolas Kiergaard, very rapid indeed, and he shares this car with Valentin Asclot, who we saw how good he was last year, and touring car and GT racer Alex McDowell. So another really impressive lineup of drivers running in the Silver Cup, and Kiergaard right now into the Parabolica.
Well, into it, I would have thought slightly slower than the following Mercedes. Didn't look like he was on it, maybe setting up, preparing for now going on to a flying lap. That last lap was 1 minute 50, which is, well, the best part of 3.5 seconds off. Still the quickest time, done by the Iron Lynx Ferrari. That lap was set on its 3rd flying lap, no surprise, on a fresh set of tyres, a new set of tyres. There is the 3rd driver in that lineup, Alessandro Pierguidi. The 50, sorry, that's the 51. That's the
yeah, that's Pierguidi.
Yeah, come Ledegaard, and I'm just looking down at the two Ferraris, the 2 Iron Lynx cars.
Yeah, Pierre Guidi, the reigning champion, of course, having won that in Paul Ricard at the end of last year, which in a way was a surprise, but Pierre Guidi has always been a very quick driver of a Ferrari, hasn't he?
He has. Never forget the weekend at Spa 24 about 3 years ago, when speaking to him on the grid and discussing how everybody would make their way up through Eau Rouge and over Radio, and he said no problem, no problem, no problem. Well, it turned out to be a massive problem because he spun in front of the entire field. He got away with it, so therefore he would have said no problem.
Everybody else had the problem behind, eyes out like chapel hat pegs. They had to avoid a spinning car, and that set the tone for the first few hours of the race. We're about to get, by the way, the 41st car of the 43 into the session, and it is number 63, Mirko Bortolotti. It hadn't really registered, because we looked at it early on in the pit lane, that it hadn't even been out at all to do a lap. So it is still slightly intriguing as to why they were just right off 30 minutes plus of the session. There's a plan, I'm sure, but only now is that car venturing out onto the circuit.
I would venture that there is a plan, and they've decided that, I'm sure they've been running this car and they know it inside out. Again, just the turn in, you can see the back of the car was fractionally, so Mirko Bortolotti. And who would you put, of the three drivers, who would you put as the quickest of the three? Marco Mappelli is the one that is always the constant between Caldarelli and Mappelli, and Bortolotti. So who would I don't know whether Bortolotti is quicker than Andrea Caldarelli. They've got different style of driving. I would say Mirko is slightly the more aggressive of the two, but certainly equally effective.
It is a hard one to answer that in terms of who is the quicker, at the risk of upsetting either of them. Maybe Mirko Bortolotti just shades it, but you're talking thousands, not even full tenths, aren't you?
It'd be very small. I mean, the difference is that Caldarelli was responsible for the development of this Orange Racing FFF Lamborghini, Orange 1 I might say, FFF Racing Lamborghini team. He and his engineers found a way to make this car do things that no other Lamborghini Huracan team had found previously. So a lot of the setup is very much based on what Caldarelli developed. Mirko Bortolotti came from the Grasser team with the Lamborghini Huracan with a different philosophy. So it's Mirko who's having to make the adaptation to a slightly different car. He's been in this car now for a number of races, so it's not as if he's a stranger to it.
Yeah, in terms of driver pace, in theory, one way you could argue is, well, we'll see who is the quicker out of the drivers in the qualifying session, but it's not really a level playing field, because whoever gets the last part of qualifying, Q3, is in the lighter car, because the fuel load has come down, so they should be the quicker, traffic allowing, because they got the lighter car. But I mean, the point is they're all very, very evenly matched. And Mirko Bortolotti, on his first flying lap, went 12th. So remember, one lap into the session, he's not been doing very much for the last 40 minutes, but straight away up to 12 fastest, and he's not done yet because he's gone green in the first sector. And as long as the traffic is kind to him, this should be another improvement. Look, another good middle sector. We're getting driving standards flags, incidentally, now for people not respecting track limits. Ezequiel Perez Companc is one of those drivers, and 54 is also now being warned about cutting the white line at pit exit. That's the dynamic Porsche of, he says, quickly hunting to see who is behind the wheel, Klaus Bachler.
But just keep an eye on Bortolotti. Made almost half a second by that second sector. Lose a fraction of time running behind the Mercedes as they exit out of Parabolica, but it will be a significant improvement from 12th up to where will Porsche 7th. So that's his second flying lap. Third lap on this set of tires. Remember, Bortolotti having not gone out for the first 30 minutes of that car, so he will have probably the best set of rubber right now of anybody out there. Wait to see whether he can continue that march forward. Last lap 147.2 is against a 146.6, so he's just over half a second away from the fastest lap set very early in the session, one might say, by the Iron Lynx Ferrari.
Now there is the redoubtable Johnny Adam, the record-breaking British GT champion, 4 times a title winner. And again, you put Johnny in an Aston Martin and just watch him fly. It was here, wasn't it, for the TF Sport team that he won Pro-Am, set the fastest lap of the race a few years ago. The first time that TF Sport had run what was then Oman Racing Team car. Now for Garage 59, the factory Aston driver joining Alexander West and Chris Goodwin. And Johnny Adam on target, I would have thought, for yet another good result within Pro-Am, but bails at the end of the lap into the pit lane and will hand the car over.
Yeah, he was, you could see as he entered into Parabolica, he had shed all the speed, and he was just taking a gentle exit from Parabolica into the pit lane. As we look back at the 26, Marcus Winkelhock, Santa Lock Racing, another new graphic for that team. As we look there, WRT resplendent. I mean, anything in Gulf racing colours is resplendent.
Stuart Hall is the man behind the wheel of that car, and second generation racer. He looks after much of the Rothko racing activity. Stuart, perhaps a little bit underrated because he's not done that much racing in the last few seasons, but he is still very, very quick indeed. His father, Peter Hall, was a good saloon touring car racer in the 70s and 80s in the UK. Got as far as the British Touring Car Championship, regular sponsor of Andy Rouse, and also Rob Rabbit for a season was Pete Hall. But Stuart then out of the Variante Ascari, busy up the road ahead of him. You can sense that the session is coming alive now as we're into this middle third. We've now got 42 cars out on track because another of the McLarens, that of Ollie Milroy, has just ventured out, so there's only one more to go. And then we have the full complement. Bit of a twitch from Stuart Hall into the Parabolica there.
Busy bit of the racetrack. You know, you're just close enough to the car ahead of you to begin to feel the effect of whatever the aerodynamic wash is, and each car will have a different aerodynamic signature when you get close to it. So Stuart Hall pulling out of the slipstream rather than staying in it, and maybe trying to gain an extra kilometre or two down into the first chicane. He opts to get out of it. I don't know why he might have done so. There's no clear reason to me that there would be any gain in doing so.
So there is the former Audi racer, Arthur Rougier, in the pit lane, who we saw last year doing a good job in the esports races as well as in real-world GT cars. Ferrari tops the times at Monza. Bentley second, the sole Bentley. Nelson Panciatici second fastest. There's number 54, Klaus Bachler, in the dynamic Porsche. And he's getting, as I say, increasingly concerned, or people are getting concerned about him cutting a white line at the pit exit. But for the moment, he presses on, goes for the times.
Well, he better learn in this session that if you consider doing something like that, certainly during the 3 hours on Sunday afternoon, then you will get a penalty for that. So get it out of your system now, and don't think about doing it, even if it is an unconscious move just before you get to the end of the demarcation line. You have to pass it before you can move from right to left on the racetrack. And ideally, if you're leaving the pit lane, you don't want to make an aggressive move right to left unless you're absolutely certain, and you can see there is nobody in that blind spot, which is always inevitable when there's a car coming down on a flying lap or a racing lap and you're just joining or rejoining the circuit.
So there's Bachler over the line, and it's not really an improver on that lap. But it's not all about times, of course, at the moment. It's about getting the car set up, and from what we're hearing out in the fresh air, it is still a pretty chilly morning. Maybe that in part is why we've seen cars sliding quite a bit, because the track temperature is just not there. The sun is shining, it kind of tricks you in a sense, but the road is still very, very cold indeed. Ezequiel Perez Companc then into the pit lane. Never really got to the bottom of why Mad Panda was a name, but we'll work on that, John.
I mean, I just not only are the graphics in the car, look at the driving suit. I mean, yes. I tell you what, whoever is behind the graphics and the whole concept of that team is, to me, star. They're absolute star. I just love the concept. I love the visuals. You wish them every success.
Now there, Nelson Panciatici in the Bentley, number 107. This is the car that is second fastest. Nelson Panciatici runs in Pro-Am. He is very much the pro. Gilles Vanderlei, successful Quick Am, and the third driver of that car is the South African bronze graded driver Stuart White. So it's going to rise and fall, I think, a little bit in the race, depending on who is behind the wheel. But it's good to see the Bentley still represented. It's a shame that the factory programme came to an end, John, wasn't it? It
is a great shame. And I mean, to me, looking at the Bentley, it's like a coat of many colours. You've got a blue right wing, a red left wing. It's an unusual concept. I mean, we've seen Bentleys previously, certainly last year, when they had issues in practice or qualifying when cars were damaged and they had to replace body panels, and sometimes those body panels were not matching to the rest of the car. But here we're starting the season and the panels don't match. So, I mean, is this a ploy or is this just circumstance?
It's almost like the leftovers put together. I think there is some kind of design in the livery. It works pretty nicely, but yes, you've got a different colour scheme on one side to the other, the way that the sort of French tricolour is spread across the car. Equally, it's quick. I mean, Nelson Panciatici, I know it's early in the weekend, but he's doing a really impressive job, isn't he?
They've done a stunning job. I mean, the car has always been a quick car. Panciatici got in, did that time, and it's remained unchallenged. I mean, the nearest to him now is Albert Costa in the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini, 41/100ths of a second behind. But as we get into the sort of final, or just after half distance in the session, the tyre that everybody would have started on is well into its middle life cycle. So the times are unlikely to improve significantly unless anybody chooses to use another set of their new tyres to go out and maybe get some feel for what they might want to do later in the afternoon.
Well, Davide Rigon is back at the wheel of 71 Ferrari, but it's sitting in the pit lane. 42 cars have been out. I'll try and work out, if I get a chance, which is the one that's missing from that list, as Romain Dumas dives down to the Parabolica, then in the dynamic Motorsport Porsche Italian team. Started off running cars in the Italian Mini Challenge before graduating to Porsches, both in one make categories, the Carrera Cup Italia, and then into GT racing. And Dumas comes back into the pit road. So, tipped past the halfway point. Davide Rigon still the fastest for Ferrari. It is Bentley second, Nelson Panciatici. Lamborghini third, Albert Costa. Mercedes fourth, the Philip Ellis 57 time. Fifth, number 4, Mercedes, Luca Stolz has taken it over. Sixth, Mercedes, Raffaele Marciello. Seventh, Lamborghini, Mirko Bortolotti. Eighth, Porsche, Romain Dumas. Ninth, BMW, Marco Wittmann at the wheel. And then McLaren 10th, Ollie Wilkinson, having now got behind the wheel as the Kessel Racing Ferrari comes over the line with Tim Koeman at the wheel of it. One of the other drivers of that car, Giorgio Roda, whose father Gianluca Roda was the winner of the first Endurance Series race here back in 2011 in a Porsche.
A Ferrari at Monza, it's like strawberries and cream. They're just naturals, just go together so comfortably.
You're right.
And
yes.
Again, for a Ferrari at Monza, currently still quickest. Actually, I'm just looking at the second chicane. That gravel that you mentioned a little bit earlier, gradually has been swept off the racing line, the exit of that second chicane. Still there, still an issue for anybody who gets on it. But just this whole concept, Ferrari and Monza, why wouldn't they win? Well, they've got a pretty good chance this weekend. Looking at the speed that we've certainly seen from the 71 Ferrari, the Iron Lynx, an amazing name. I wonder again where that originates from.
I shall research. The Castle Racing squad, stalwarts of international GT racing, no matter what the championship for the last decade plus, as well as Ferrari Challenge. And Tim Koeman, new to the series, comes down towards the Parabolica. This car, as I think I said a moment or two ago, is one of the Pro-Am entries, so drivers for the moment playing their way in, just getting a feel for a car with a lot of grunt and a lot of aero, and a chilly circuit. Into the pit lane comes Tim Koeman then. 40 minutes to go. And still our 43rd car not yet out. Jordan Love is at the helm of number 40, the SPS Automotive Performance Mercedes, the Australian driver with Nicholas Bourne and Yannick Metier. And that's another car, I suspect, that if it keeps out of trouble, if it just does good, consistent lap times, could well be a contender at the end of the third hour come tomorrow afternoon.
If you're not on the front 3 or 4 rows of the grid, which is where overall victor is most likely to come from, and you're midfield, certainly at the start and the early laps, everything that is done by whichever driver will be behind the wheel has got to be about, I would say, self-preservation. Avoid trouble, but more importantly, keep an eye around you to make sure that there's not an unguided missile coming down as you turn into a chicane here up at the Ascari, for example, the best chicane here at Monza, and a great example of what a good chicane should be, doesn't come down and T-bone you. You need to have an awareness, a spatial awareness of not just yourself, but of all those around you.
Well, Jordan Love, newcomer to Monza, but getting on with the job quite nicely here as he comes up towards the exit of the Parabolica, runs it out onto the curb, up now towards the timing line, and as he breaks the beam, does on that lap a 1:49.446, so that is 41st, that car. But it's only done 4 laps. It's a relative newcomer to the session. That's the 222 Porsche that had a spin early on. Nicolas Scherl rotated early on in the session. Jan Kasperlik, who is graduating from the GT4 European Series to GT3, is the man behind the wheel. And he's going to have a pretty interesting time behind the wheel of this car, learning, John, about the difference that GT3 has over GT4, because all that aero that he's encountering now makes a big, big difference, of course.
Yeah, the aero it is probably the most significant difference between the GT3 and GT4. And of course, with aero, then you get the benefit of additional braking, because the aero has a very big impact on the braking capacity. And just these cars are closer to what you might describe as a pure racing car, or almost a silhouette GT car, whereas the GT4 is very much your turnkey, go to your local Mercedes or VW Audi dealer or whatever, where that car has to run within a much more restricted regulation. These are very, very sophisticated, very quick cars, and now with the technology that is available, becoming more race car like than GT car.
It's true, yes. It's good also, I know we say this every season, but each year there are more of them. It's good to see more and more Porsches coming back into GT racing. Great to see.
Well, one might say, thank you, Mr. Balance of Performance, because a factor in all this is it's not the only factor, but the balance of performance is what has given us such great racing over so many seasons. The fact that you can take a car with a design, as we've talked about 1,000 times, and compare it to something that is totally contemporary and modern, with a carbon fibre McLaren, for example, the only pure, true carbon fibre chassis car here this weekend. It's actually a monocell rather than a carbon fibre tub. Very sophisticated process that McLaren employ. Originally they were being made in Austria because the technology was there, now being made at the McLaren Tech Centre, and that is about as contemporary as you can get.
Yes, very definitely, as Audi gets set at WRT to wave another car out. There is currently 28th fastest, number 52, which is Louis Machiel's double Pro-Am champion, back for another season, but with a slight shuffling of the driver lineup, because although Andrea Bertolini remains, Lorenzo Bontempelli is the third driver rather than Nick Homerson, who's not racing at the start of the season, so a little shuffle within the driving lineup. But Louis Machiel's another veteran of the series, great enthusiasm. He comes back season after season after season, doesn't he?
This is the heart, if you like, of this, of the whole SRO GT philosophy. It's not just about little hot rods, you know, kids that have been 18 years of age, who've been spending half their life karting and then coming in. Again, looking at the back of the Ferrari, even it, which is one of the best balanced cars out there, sliding around under power on the exit of Parabolica. So either the track conditions, track temperature is probably still low. I don't know when this circuit was in use last for a significant motor race. Certainly you can see under braking, lots of rubber down in the braking zone. But certainly we've seen in Lesmo, certainly Lesmo 1, and now we're seeing in Parabolica likewise, on the exit in particular, a number of cars just have that momentary just loss of adhesion, easily corrected, but it's just still there.
I think I'm right in saying the Ferrari Challenge was here a week ago, but it's had relatively little use, the circuit, for race meetings this year, as we see in replay the Iron Lynx Ferrari running way out wide. That's Alessandro Pierguidi. Our 43rd car has just gone onto the circuit, and again, because it's one that we'd already seen, at least in the pit lane, I'd rather have been tricked into thinking it had gone out, but it hadn't. It was a Charles Weerts, Dries van Thor, Kelvin van der Linde Audi. That was the one that was missing, and it has now ventured out with Charles Weerts at the wheel. So they've given up very nearly an hour of the hour-and-a-half session, but finally 32 is on the circuit, John.
Indeed, just going back to the Iron Lynx Ferrari, Pierguidi running wide in Lesmo, he did actually manage to detach a little bit of carbon fibre from the left front of the splitter. So next time you catch that car on camera, look to the left front, because to me it is hanging down and dragging. And I did see some, I think, one of the little sort of turning vanes that they have around the front splitter in these cars flying off into the gravel trap. So that will have a bearing on that currently still fastest Ferrari.
Riccardo Feller, number 14, the Emil Frey Lamborghini driver, he's under investigation for crossing the pit exit white line. Charles Weerts, in the meantime, out onto a first proper flying lap now, so this will be interesting to see where what you might call the top Audi is likely to be.
Well, he's got a little bit of traffic to contend with. It'll still be a very good lap, because you know the car is, and the team are such a well-honed operation. Charles Weerts, likewise. I mean, we used to call him young Charles Weerts. His experience and his growth as a racing driver has been considerable and rapid. So I would expect him to be on it more or less straight away. I mean, Monza is a relatively straightforward racetrack. You've raced here previously. You don't need to spend too much time finding out where the track goes, and particularly if you're on a brand new set of rubber, which I would assume that Charles Weerts is. You can see that he's able to place the car. The car looks very stable, very planted as it exits out of the Ascari chicane, looking to find a way around the Lamborghini, and that's going to be a slight frustration, because it's going to spoil, and he's backed out of it. He's actually given up this lap because he realizes he couldn't do anything coming into Parabolica. Drops back now, starts the process all over again, having used this lap to try and establish his first flying lap.
So goes for it now. That will at least put a lap on the board, but it is the slowest of all, a 1:52.101. Traffic allowing, it will not stay there at the end of the lap. Now let's stay with Charles Weerts then and put the lap together. As I say, it's all going to be a little bit dependent upon traffic, but if the traffic is kind, this should be a really quick lap. And now, John, into the Curva Grande.
Basically, it's almost deja vu. He's going to be running close to the Lamborghini there, and you can see how much, even in the space of that third of a lap in the first sector, he's closed down the gap, as opposed to when they came across. Whoa, Charles Weerts, very heavy on the throttle on the exit of the second chicane, gathers it all up, and I suspect that's the consequence of seeing the speed at which he's running down the Lamborghini. That's one of the Barwell, I believe. Lamborghinis, and again he's going to find himself in the same situation he found himself in 1 lap ago, coming down into Parabolica, closing up to the back of a car that's in a different category to the category he's racing in. So this is where a strong head is very important on a young shoulder, to make sure you don't throw it away through simply by being frustrated.
Absolutely so. And Charles Weerts then getting a little bit ragged on this lap, but if he can clear the the Lamborghini, it's a long time since Barwell had Aston Martins. If he can clear the Lamborghini, then the road opens up a little bit to him, and he comes off the Parabolica behind Adrian Amstutz, then ready to try and pounce now past the Barwell Lamborghini, side by side over the timing line. 43rd Charles Weerts was, and straight away he goes up to 19th, even with those tiny little moments on that lap. So a pretty good opening effort, and there's more to come, of course.
Well, you say there's more to come, but he's used the best of a set of tyres. Now, he's still got a set of tyres that's younger than probably anybody else running right now. Nevertheless, he knows that 1 lap earlier, had he been able to find a way around Amstutz and the Lamborghini, he would have been even quicker. And that's why we saw that little bit of frustration coming in on the exit of coming down to the second chicane and around the racetrack, knowing that he was quicker in the lap and he was going to catch the Lamborghini in a position where 1 lap earlier he had to bail out of it.
So how is this lap being put together by Charles Weerts there? Well, again, he's improved in the first sector and he's pressing on. 28 minutes are on the clock. Ferrari still topping the times, courtesy of the Iron Lynx entry of Antonio Fuoco, Davide Rigon, Callum Eilert. And the Bentley second, Nelson Panciotici's time. Gilles Vanelay now behind the wheel of it. Adrian Amstutz then for Barwell, the Swiss industrialist. Came back into racing after his nasty Spa 24 accident of a couple of years ago, but graduate of Lamborghini Super Trofeo. And for Barwell this year, Miguel Ramos, Enrique Chavez, Adrian Amstutz, all in Pro-Am. Barwell also running a Sprint Cup car for the first time, as well as Endurance Cup and British GT. So Mark Lemmer's team being busy, that is for sure. Mathieu Jaminet is behind as Adrian Amstutz now heads into the Parabolica once more.
So we've lost sight of Charles Weerts, so we're going to have to look at timing and scoring to see as the Audi just goes out of sight. Lamborghini into the pit lane and the Porsche continues on. So will there be any further advance from Charles Weerts? Nothing appeared on our timing and scoring to indicate that he's gotten himself into the top 15 anyway.
No, the last lap actually unravelled a bit. The sector 1 was an improvement, 2 and 3 were slower. Maybe he got caught in traffic, as you see the BMWs there battle down towards the Parabolica. 35 is the car that we were looking at earlier in the context of Timo Glock, Thomas Neubauer, Martin Tomczyk, the other drivers of 35. And number 10 is the Boutsen-Gignon BMW, Karim Auger, Jens Liebhauser and Jens Klingmann. Karim Auger is the driver behind the wheel. And that is another of the Pro-Am cars. Another really creative colour scheme that draws attention to itself by the Boutsen-Gignon team. I like that one.
Yes, and there's a long story around that very retro. It's an homage to what was something that BMW did many years ago, many decades ago now, where they had a series of art cars, and this is a part of all that as an homage to what BMW did. And there's an artist, French artist, Michel Valiant, I think his name, I don't maybe pronounce it correctly, and he was a cartoonist, and you can see that big boom down the side of the BMW. Well, that was a part of what he was all about. And Michel Valiant was a cartoon race driver, very popular in France in the day.
Yes, it was about a decade plus ago, wasn't it, that a car ran at Le Mans as part of a Michel Vaillant film that was being made. Michel Neugarten, I think, was one of the drivers of the car, and it was for a French movie. But yes, Michel Vaillant, the fictitious French racing driver, he was the sort of French version of Skid Solo. If you are of a certain age, you remember Skid Solo. And down towards the Parabolica then comes Michel Vaillant, masquerading as Karim Auger, 22nd fastest in the BMW.
And Karim slip of the tongue there. Auger, and again, just such an enthusiast, loves his motor racing.
Yeah.
Probably in the best car, I think, of all that he's raced so far. BMW is a very, very user-friendly car, and not likely to give him, Karim, I'm talking about, the kind of adventures we remember when he had that big accident up the top of the straight at Spa-Francorchamps coming into Les Combes. I think it was BMW Z4M, if I'm not mistaken.
You're absolutely right. I was just going to make the point about Karim. It's interesting because on occasions he's drifted away from the Endurance Cup to go off and do the sports club races, as they used to be called, the Gentleman Drivers Series, if you like. But even though he won races in that, he's been drawn back again and again into the Endurance Cup because I think the level of competition is so much stronger, and it just brings out the best in him. So he went off for a season or so and won some races and had a good time, but has come back into this and improves as a driver as a consequence.
Well, there's no doubt that when you compete at a higher level, it will draw you up to that level, whereas if you drop down a level, and with respect to those competitors, then you end up at the level of those competitors you're competing against. So you'd always want to aim for the highest level that's attainable or possible, and that's what Karim has done over certainly the last couple of seasons.
Well, right now, Thomas Neubauer is at the wheel of number 35 BMW. At the Barwell Lamborghini we were looking at a little while ago, by the way, has a transponder glitch, so just for the purpose of record, it was Miguel Ramos at the wheel of that car. But Neubauer, who had a Sprint Cup win, of course, outright as a silver driver at Brands Hatch going back 3 seasons, comes up towards the timing line and will break the beam quick in sector 1, down in 2 and down in 3, so no real improvement for that car that remains therefore 34th fastest out of 43 that we have going into this opening round of Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe powered by AWS Endurance Cup.
I suppose one might say it's notable that not an awful lot has changed in the top 10 since really the first 15 minutes or so of this 1.5 hour session. We've just got over 22 minutes remaining. So change of driver in the Porsche team. All the additional little connections that have to be made. And the car is going to go back into the garage to have additional work carried out.
So we're getting towards the final 20 minutes or so of this free practice session. The other activity for GT3 cars today is the 90 minutes of pre-qualifying. And then, of course, we get qualifying, the 3 segments tomorrow morning and the 3-hour race tomorrow afternoon. So the teams have had their testing, but now this is into the serious business of the weekend. Some of the teams very happy about the pace of the car. I understand from the pit lane that the Mad Panda squad happy with the pace, so conserving tyres, not overdoing things this morning, getting ready for pre-qualifying. Lorenzo Bontempelli, 52 Ferrari, 29th this car in Pro-Am at the moment.
I mean, just looking at the bottom half of the field, 22nd, or car 22, I should say, Matt Campbell, Earl Bamber, Mathieu Jaminet, GPX Martini Racing. What is it doing there? I mean, okay, you might say, does it really matter in terms of time? Because this is just the first time everybody has been on track here this weekend. Well, it does matter, because tomorrow morning qualifying will be run in identical conditions, and I'm sure, unless we have some kind of a global warming, exceptional global warming overnight, we're not going to see anything other than what we've got here temperature-wise tomorrow morning.
Yes, it is going to be almost a carbon copy, you're quite right, as the qualifying 3-segment process cycles through to determine the grid for the first Endurance Cup race of the season, which again has the blue ribbon event of the Total 24 Hours of Spa over the July 31st, August the 1st weekend. Bontempelli up towards the end of the lap. This is going to be a car, as ever, to keep an eye on in that Pro-Am battle, which is hugely competitive. Up towards the timing line, Ferrari veteran is Lorenzo Bontempelli, and he breaks the beam. Doesn't go any quicker, but as we keep making the point, this isn't about doing times necessarily. You can think about that when you get to pre-qualifying, or certainly tomorrow in that qualifying session. But right now it's about setup, it's about getting your driver comfortable with the car. And actually, he says, tempting fate a little bit here, I know, but it has been a relatively calm morning, hasn't it? We've not had too many dramas. Yes, the odd slide, but a couple of spins early doors, nothing really since we had the big Tim Zimmerman slide. They've all been pretty well behaved, haven't they, John?
I would say more or less. I mean, certainly in the early 15 minutes we saw more action, particularly through Lesmo and also through the exit of Parabolica. But fundamentally, everybody's been relatively well behaved. 63 Lamborghini, Bertolotti. I'm not sure who's behind the wheel of that car presently. It's Mappelli. It is Marco Mappelli. So all you're doing, to some degree, is learning what you need to learn for qualifying on Sunday morning, but cycle your drivers through, give them all a sensible amount of seat time. And it's not just a question of getting accustomed to your car, but there are new faces out there. There are different operations running different machinery, so just it's about an education. This 1.5 hours is go out and learn all you can and disregard the unimportant stuff and focus on what's going to help you.
At that previous chicane, I thought I saw a marshal putting a yellow flag away, and have a look at the front of the Bentley that they just got past, because it looks like it's got a bit of clutter in the front, be it gravel or grass. I think Gilles Vanelay at the wheel may have had a little moment. The Bentley is no longer, there it is in the back of the shop, but it's going rather slowly. I think it's recovering after a moment. So having just said that people weren't disgracing themselves, the Bentley may have had a moment out of sight. Number 163, Albert Costa, under investigation for speeding in the pit lane, we understand. And as the session has just under 18 minutes to go, Eddie Cheever is good for a word. In the pit lane is Gemma Scott.
Eddie, you're looking fairly relaxed down here at the moment. The car seems to be running well, pace seems to be good.
Yeah, everything's great. The weather is really nice. I'm so happy to start the season again, and hopefully we're going to have a strong race tomorrow.
You mentioned the weather there. You said to me earlier, if it did rain this weekend, you wouldn't be a happy boy.
I prefer it not to rain. It's the first race. Everybody is super excited, and we all know how Monza can be at the first corner, at the first lap. So honestly, I prefer it's going to be a dry day like today.
And obviously you guys are looking to defend your title this year.
It's going to be a tough one. The competition is super strong, and but we will try our best. We have Stefan on board for this race, and hopefully John can come back soon, because we really miss him.
Thanks a lot, Eddie.
The Jonathan referred to, Jonathan Hui, who is the Hong Kong driver, and of course with travel not being the easiest around the world at the moment, so he's having to sit out this first event of the season. Chris Froggatt then is behind the wheel of the Sky Tempesta Racing Ferrari, and this is the exit of the Rettifilio chicane, John.
Yes, a little bit of oversteer on the exit, just the rear tyre almost at the point of running the curb, just gave up its grip now directly behind the Mercedes, thinking, well, will he give me place, will he give me room into the chicane, second chicane? Nowhere near even thinking about it, bounces over the inside curb, runs the exit curb, but stays pointing in a straight line, closes up to the rear of the Mercedes into Lesmo 1, just really using the racetrack to try and give himself the best advantage, rather than literally following in the wheel tracks of the Mercedes directly ahead. Now, got an opportunity for straight line speed between all the brands here these days is almost identical. Up the hill into the Ascari, thinks about it, shows the nose down the inside, just to try and put pressure on the Mercedes to make it think backwards rather than thinking forwards. Fractional loss of track position actually coming through the chicane. So Chris Froggatt, whether he did that deliberately to get a run on the exit, but has lost enough ground to make it impossible to do anything coming into Parabolica other than under brake, close up. So on the exit again, not quite in the wheel tracks of the Mercedes, looking around for opportunities, trying to create opportunities, comes across the start-finish line, and it's more or less status quo between these two cars. A little bit of extra straight line performance from the Ferrari now in the final part of the straight here at Monza, but not enough to give him. There is the Bentley, by the way, that you were talking about, David, and clearly there has been some grass cutting or something, but all the little turning vanes would appear to be in place, so maybe it was just a little bit of grass that got picked up.
Well, we had a line on the timing screen to say that it had hit the barrier. Now, it might have been a nudge rather than a full-on hit, but clearly it was a slow in-lap, driver out of car, so Gilles Vannelet has a little bit of explaining to do. As over the line goes Konsta Lapalainen in the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini. That's the car with Arthur Rougier and Jack Aitken that John was talking about earlier. Jack Aitken, another newcomer to GT racing, and it's 26th overall, this car right now.
I just wonder, for all, you know, Callum Ilott, that car is currently quickest, so he's sitting back very happy indeed. Jack Aitken, a little bit, his car further back in the field, 26th position. There is a degree of culture shock for kids coming out of, you know, high-end performance single-seater racing into GT racing. It is not a given because you can do a stunning job in one discipline that it will necessarily immediately carry forward into the one that you're right now involved in. It takes time to adjust and adapt and to realize that even though these cars develop significantly large amounts of downforce, they are not a lightweight single-seater high downforce race car.
And equally, you might adapt very, very well, but if one of your co-drivers doesn't, your results are compromised through no fault of your own, aren't they?
That's one of the joys of sharing. in any field, in any form of life, David. You know what I mean? I do indeed,
yes. So right now, Konsta Lapalainen, new to the championship, is behind the wheel. 32 Audi, by the way. We saw Charles Weerts behind the wheel a little while ago. Dries Van Thor has taken it over and it's up into 16th in the times as Lapalainen hangs it out wide out of the parabolica up towards the timing line, and he will break the beam now, but it doesn't look like a stellar lap. No, it's not. Keeps him 26th fastest. One of the two Lapalainen brothers that races. Earl Bamber only 21st, so it's a very odd order in a sense, with quick drivers a long way down, but just wait until we get to qualifying, it'll all start to make a little bit more sense. New for Audi this year, James Pull, driving for Team WRT in number 30, and James is with Gemma Scott.
James, things seem to be running well for you guys, third in class at the moment. Are you happy to get it back out on track at last?
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling to just be back on the track after such a long break, but yeah, it's been a good start so far. We had some trouble with the paid practice the other day, so it's good to be back on track, and everything feels really good, so I'm really excited.
What's the track like out there this morning? It's a quick track, isn't it?
Yeah, since the air temperature's quite cold, it's working really well for the car. The track's really fast, as you can see from some of the times. And it feels just amazing to be back. I'm sure it's going to get faster anyway as the grip's laid down, but yeah, it just feels amazing.
Absolutely. WRT, renowned for being hugely successful across the board in GT. You guys are running fastest as well, one of your teammates.
Yeah, these guys have been one of the most successful teams in GT3 racing, period. So obviously I feel very fortunate to be racing with them. The atmosphere has been amazing, the car has been great so far, and also the team atmosphere has been really good with our car. So I'm really happy, and I've got to thank these guys for letting me drive for them.
Thanks, James. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, no problem.
James Poole, just to finish off that story, mentioning they had a problem in the paid test. A legacy of that is the car has a new engine, but because it was before the event started, similar to changing a chassis of a car, having a replacement car, no penalty comes. So that car with a new engine going into the official part of the weekend. Just 10 more minutes of the session remain as the Emil Frey Lamborghini is dispatched down the pit road. Number 63 is 8th fastest now, Marco Mappelli. Dries Van Thor, by the way, is up into the top 6. One or two cars, John, late session, coming alive, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that Dries van Thor, regardless of what that car has done earlier in the session under Charles Weerts's hands, but Dries van Thor is really, really, if anybody can drive an Audi, he is the one that's going to do it, and he knows how to drag a time out, get that single quick lap, and he's done very well. Now, he's only done 12 laps, and his fastest lap, that car's fastest lap was done on its 12th lap. So those tyres, in relative terms, are amongst the freshest out there. Marco Mappelli, on the other hand, looking to see where he can drag his car up to that. But then again, Marco Mappelli's 63 Lamborghini's best lap was done on its 3rd lap. That would be its 2nd flying lap. And right now the car is on its 20th lap, again on that same set of tyres. Again, just everybody's, I know so many people have had a problem in Lesmo 1, and you heard James Poole describing that low ambient temperature is great for engine and power and things like that, but if the track temperature is really cold and it'll take a little bit of time for the sun to get to that part of the track, it is quite a shaded part of the racetrack. That is maybe the reason why a number of cars are just showing that little bit of very rapid rear end snap oversteer.
True enough, yes. So 1 or 2 more improvements coming. Dries van Thor as an example. Marco Mappelli is 8th. This isn't going to be an improvement this lap because you can see he is slightly slower in the sectors. But it's been an interesting morning. New drivers to get used to, new colour schemes, people switching from brand to brand. And 9 brands in total, 43 cars in the entry list. It's going to be another very strong season for the Endurance Cup, and actually as well, just looking ahead to May, the Sprint Cup has a very, very strong entry, better than for a number of seasons as well. So GT racing is in great health, which is really good to see. That's the car that has topped the times in this session. Davide Rigon is at the wheel of now a 71 Ferrari, 146.674. That was a time set on the car's 3rd lap of the session. So many of the good times done really early on.
Yes, I mean, again, a function simply of new tyres, albeit on a cool circuit.
So as Davide Rigon comes out of the chicane, Callum Ilott is being able to watch all of this. It's been a good start to a GT career for Callum. His car is quickest and he is with Gemma.
Callum, that's a pretty impressive debut there, taking it straight to the top of the timings.
Yeah, I mean, Antonio started the first stint, and obviously everyone going out on new. I think he got a good clear lap and was able to go to the top. So far the pace seems quite good, even in my stints. We're quite strong considering the age of the tyre, but yeah, I mean, it was a good first run, but there's a long weekend ahead, so we'll see what happens.
There is indeed a long weekend ahead, but and of course for you this is all about adapting from single-seaters across to the GTs. How are you settling in?
It's all right at the moment. It's not too bad. No, I'm enjoying driving the car. It's really, really good to, hit some curves once. But yeah, I think, right now it's obviously a pure lap time kind of situation, and that's my strength normally. So we'll see when we come to the race. It will obviously be quite different. A lot of cars to manage, pit stops, driver changes, and that's something that I need to get used to.
Well, good luck and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
So Callum Ilott is very happy with life so far. This is the view on board with Davide Rigon, who I think aims to end the session with a flourish here, John. He's still pressing on, isn't he?
I mean, he'll try to drag the best he can out of this car, and this is the car that has dominated more or less from the minute the track went green. And it's interesting, Callum Ilott, his thoughts about the changeover from primarily Formula 2 and then being a part of Ferrari's academy into a GT car, and it isn't a walk in the park, but a talented driver like Callum Ilott will make that change quickly, as we watch Davide Rigon, who of course is so familiar with the Ferrari 488, knows it basically inside out, can run the curbs to the very limit on the exit of Lesmo 1, gets the nose in, runs again wide, just keeping the rear wheel on that curbing on the exit of Lesmo 2, and then it's just that straightforward run, sit back, think about it. Now what are you going to do with the Lamborghini directly ahead? Are you going to back out of it and sacrifice the slap? Are you going to try and get a good exit out of the Ascari chicane, but the gap between the Lamborghini and the Ferrari, probably all that Rigon will benefit will be an aerodynamic two. He isn't going to be close enough to make a move down the inside. So back out of it a little bit early, get on the throttle a little bit earlier to get the drive now to ensure that when you reach the exit of Parabolica, you are quicker than the car you're following, which is precisely what Davide Rigon has done. So that's what a driver needs to do. He needs to adapt to the situations you find yourself in. Every lap is going to be different. So he read it very well. He did what he needed to do, and he gained the benefit of doing so. Otherwise, had he tried to be racy into Parabolica, he wouldn't have been able to make that pass.
Rattles it over the curb as he goes there through the Rettifiglio. He's back on the power, but almost now, if you like, starting his pre-qualifying session, because this is a serious bid, and even with the traffic, he's not being fazed by it. He's not backing out of the laps. He's pushing. So Davide Rigon then presses on into the second chicane. As you see there, the Ram Racing McLaren, Sam Dehaan, at the wheel of the car, with reigning British GT champion Rob Collard and Callum McLeod, who's been a Ram Racing regular for a few seasons, former Bentley driver as well, Formula Ford champion. There'll be an interesting mix of drivers, I think, for Ram Racing, and that is another of the cars that runs in this hugely competitive Pro-Am contest that we have. But Sam Dehaan, another graduate of the British GT scene, one to watch.
Of course, Rob Collard, enthusiast and enthusiastic, almost beyond his tender years. And I mean, in a pink car, Rob.
Yeah, got some explaining to do there. He's really...
Well, when he goes back to his day job, he's got to get ribbed for that one.
Absolutely right, but he's really embraced GT racing, hasn't he? Because of course he won British GT as a championship last year, class winner in the Spa 24 Hours, as well as doing the Endurance Cup full season as well. And it's really, dare one say, rejuvenated Rob. A new challenge away from the British Touring Car Championship, and has absolutely revelled in it. And winning British GT, I know it's Sam Dehaan that we're looking at, but just to finish the point about his co-driver, Rob Collard, remarkably honest guy. He was interviewed at the end of the British GT Championship last year, and I asked him about what it was like driving a car with aero, and he was honest enough, John, to admit that when he'd done a full day's testing at Silverstone at the start of the season, by the end of the day he was actually sick because of the directional changes with all the aero being like nothing he'd ever experienced in touring car racing. And you know, some drivers wouldn't have mentioned that, they'd have kept it quiet for fear of being a sissy, but Rob actually, as I say, remarkably honest, and he's a very good guy to have in GT racing.
Not a pleasant experience feeling ill or being ill, especially when you're driving, and but of course that indicates that as fit as Rob is, there are other things that you can do to enhance your fitness, and core body fitness is now such an important element within any form of motor racing, because if you haven't got a good core condition, it means that your entire diaphragm sort of is sloshing around, and that's a sudden braking. What is that all about?
We've gone yellow. We've gone to a full course yellow on the instruction of the race director looking at it, because yes, there's the board.
I was going to say, so this was probably pre-planned. It wasn't just something thrown in at the behest. That would have been, I'm sure teams would have hopefully been made aware that that was going to happen.
Yeah, there's normally a countdown, isn't there, on the radio. Quite often the race director Alain Adon will do a test within the free practice session, and over the radio it will be full course yellow in 20 seconds, full course yellow in 10, and then he will count them down. Full course yellow now, everybody slows down, and now it's a green flag. So without being able to find anybody off the road, I think that was purely a test to get the drivers, the teams, used to the full course yellow process. So free practice, you talk about it really in terms of the drivers and the teams, but even from race control there are things that are useful to do in free practice. Get them out of the way, get people drilled in for the rest of the weekend, and of course the checkered flag is imminent now, but a useful exercise there from the race director.
Well, a very important exercise likewise, because you know, if this hadn't been carried out and that there was a necessity at some point, maybe either in qualifying but more likely in the race, at least people who are on the track, because there are two other drivers in every car here, they will not have enjoyed it literally as these on track would have done. But an important exercise to carry out, that everybody will understand when a full course yellow is instructed that you must slow down instantly. And the problem would be in a race if you were a group of cars all nose to tail coming down past the pits. Be on your toes, my friends, be on your toes.
Checkered flag is out, so the Ferrari fastest, as it has been really for about an hour and a half. Davide Rigon's efforts, along with those of Callum Eilert and Antonio Fuoco, keeping the car at the very top. But the good news is that we've got through that session without high drama, which means that there's limited work the teams need to do before that pre-qualifying 90-minute period to come a little bit later on in the day. It's a very busy programme for the opening SRO events of the season, because you've got the new GT2 Championship, GT4 European Series kicks off here as well, and Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and then each of the teams with a overall or a Silver Cup entry in World Challenge Europe is in the new esports series backed by Fanatec at the end of the day. And so it's a 1 hour race, and the top 3 drivers in that for their teams will bring points across into the teams championship for the real world. It's a merger, if you like, of virtual and real world racing in terms of the points and the integration thereof. But the Fanatec Arena will have this first esports event at the end of today. As you see there, the Iron Lynx Ferrari back in the pit lane, and Davide Rigon, Antonio Fuoco and Callum Eilert have had the absolute perfect start to the weekend there, John, haven't they?
Well, look at the car. It is, to all intents and purposes, as immaculate now as it was when it went out on track an hour and a half ago. Ideal start for the team. Car was clearly very well balanced, and in terms of the setup, appropriate to Fuoco, who did that lap on his second flying lap, third lap in total. So strong challenge from Ferrari.
So the provisional times then at the end of that session: Antonio Fuoco, Callum Eilert, Davide Rigon fastest by just under half a second from Nelson Panciatici, doing the time in the 107 Bentley. Albert Costa did the lion's share of the work in number 163 Lamborghini to be third, ahead of Philip Ellis in the Mercedes, and then Mauro Engel doing the gun time for Mercedes number 4. It was Dries Van Thor up for 6th, it was Raffaele Marciello 7th, Mirko Bortolotti 8th. I'm not sure Andrea Caldarelli got behind the wheel of that car. 9th fastest being the dynamic Porsche, and David Pittard taking over number 34 BMW right at the very end. In terms of the classes, of course, the overall best time, the overall Ferrari, but then for Pro-Am, it was Gilles Vanelay, Nelson Panciatici, and the third driver, Stuart White, in the Bentley, and the best of the silvers was to be found 4th, namely the Mikael Grenier, number 57, Philip Ellis, and Russell Ward, Mercedes. So an interesting shuffle of the order I'm sure we will have when we get to the pre-qualifying session a little bit later on. Scroll through the list and you can see some of the names that we haven't yet really got to because it's been such a busy session. Another one to watch, I think, the other McLaren, Ollie Milroy, and the very spectacular, very fast American driver Brendan Arieb, only 37th, but that'll be one to watch, I think, with a bit more mileage under the driver's belts as we get through the weekend. So good start to the day for Ferrari. Let's have a quick look at the highlights of that session that began with not everybody, surprisingly, but the bulk of the field venturing out onto a pretty chilly circuit, limited track temperature, and straight away there were 1 or 2 drivers exploring the outer limits, including Tim Zimmerman, who had the wildest of spins coming out of the Variante Ascari. Got away with that, as other drivers had to cope with people running off the road, and we had the Mad Panda Mercedes going rapidly for Rick Brokers. Klaus Bachler had a moment and was slow, and Davide Rigon was a driver that was, as I say, able to keep number 71 Ferrari at the top of the times. Antonio Fuoco doing a good job early on. Number 32 was out very, very late indeed, and running out wide, Alessandro Pierguidi just flicking off a little bit of the diffuser of the sister Iron Lynx Ferrari. Nelson Panciatici looking good in the Bentley, but at the end of the free practice session, Ferrari tops the times here at Monza.